Reading Lively's 80-page claim that she lodged with the Californian Civil Rights Department has been really triggering. Over a year ago, after months of trying to compile it on my own without legal support and in a state of severe PTSD, I lodged a 40-page claim to my local equivalent, the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, about a former employer. I was trying to be concise. It actually could have been just as long as Lively's, if not longer, probably. I've tried since then to repeatedly engage in mediation through VCAT to achieve some accountability and transparency about how harassment and safety complaints and issues are addressed and how retaliation for speaking out happens. To read what is obviously a much larger scale of reputational sabotage, retaliation, gaslighting, following what were Blake Lively's incredibly reasonable demands, her frankly just basic legal rights requests, her demands that Baldoni's team is calling it, were essentially just her asking for her workplace to be a safe environment for herself and for other people. This was also the case with me. What got me into the bad books was repeatedly asking for what I now know were my basic legal rights, and for safety and equality training policies and processes to be clear, to be followed and adhered to. These are not outrageous demands, they're not. Melissa Nathan was hired in July, which is before anyone had noticed that Blake Lively wasn't following Wayfarer and Baldoni on social media. It was before the premiere on August 7th when people started asking questions about why the female cast and the female author of the book weren't posing or doing the press line with Baldoni. So what actually triggered the intention to discredit Lively in a preemptive strike was that she had, during production, months and months ago, had a meeting, essentially an HR meeting, where she put in writing those demands for basic things like an intimacy coordinator and, hey, stop walking in on me when I'm naked, stop looking at my breasts when I ask you not to, stop talking about your porn addiction, stop talking about your experiences of non-consensual sex, things like that. It was a preemptive strike because Baldoni and Heath knew that they had done things, that there was a paper trail, and they were paranoid that it might become public at some point and they wanted to discredit her in advance. So this was not crisis management of an actual crisis, in other words. It was an offensive move to preempt the possibility that the truth might come out about Baldoni and Heath's behaviour on set. It was a decision to try to destroy Lively's credibility just in case she might speak out publicly against them at some point in the future. So it wasn't actually managing an attack that was happening to them. It was preempting that. It was trying to prevent that possibility from ever being effective. So this has also happened to me, albeit much more quietly on a much smaller scale. People ask, why did it take so long to come forward? If it was really that bad, why didn't you just walk away? Or why didn't you do something at the time? In my case, I did do something at the time, repeatedly, continually. I kept trying, and I kept being given reassurances that things would change. And I believed them. I wanted to believe them until I couldn't. And then I tried to deal with it quietly and privately and give them every chance to address the problems without blowing shit up, because I actually care about fixing the issues, not about causing a scene. And I was naive because I thought, you follow the process, right? Like, you work within the system, you put in a report, and then you trust your bosses to follow protocol and processes. You trust your bosses, especially when they present themselves as being your friends. You trust them to be doing the right thing. And, if you're being manipulated and lied to constantly, then it makes it even harder to think straight. Then when that fails, when the internal processes fail, you think, okay, so I'll put in a report to the governing state body and they'll handle it. Well, it turns out that all that body could offer was assistance in securing a financial settlement, and that would be attached to an NDA. And regardless, like, there'd be zero accountability for the actual allegations, the actual problems would not be addressed. The actual behaviour would not be addressed. My list of demands, because yes, mine was also called a list of demands. That's what their lawyers called it. What they should have called it was a list of suggested resolutions, which was something that I was legally required to provide VCAT with. I was legally required to provide them with a list of suggested resolutions. But no, it's a list of demands. Those resolutions were chiefly suggestions that would benefit the organisation, not myself, because my motivation has been to make that organisation safer. That has been my motivation. If my motivation was money, I would have taken the money, right? Similar to Lively's, Baldoni's team are saying that she presented this list of demands. If you look at her actual claim documents, her list of demands are things like, we want an intimacy coordinator on set for intimate scenes, like stuff which should be standard now. In the wake of a written record in May of 2022 about why I intended to resign officially. Basically, I had for years from within been trying to address the issues of safety, and since then I've been trying to address them from without, privately, and with the intent that the organisation can thrive if it addresses the issues of safety, accountability, proper policy and processes being followed when it comes to reports of harassment, inappropriate behaviour, abuse. At no point did I ever intend to try to destroy the organisation. As a member of the board recently told me, point blank, that I would be single-handedly responsible for destroying this organisation if my evidence becomes public. In exposing the behaviour of men in positions of authority, I, a woman with no authority, would be responsible for the consequences of those men's behaviour. Not only that, but their behaviour was considered to be so reprehensible and damaging that it would inevitably, this board member said, it would inevitably result in the total implosion and destruction of the organisation that these men lead. Yet somehow, despite her saying that behaviour was still not reprehensible or damaging enough to warrant an investigation or an external audit. I've got to wonder why still nobody in a position of responsibility or authority has ever sought to address my allegations with anything but denial, threats, and invented attacks on my character and accusations of misconduct, which they have no evidence for because they simply made it up, done a fishing expedition to see what they could find, because they knew I had incriminating information about their conduct over the years and they were afraid that I would use it and wanted to discredit me in case I did use it, a preemptive strike. It was really shocking and distressing for me to realise that people that I had thought of as deeply flawed, but, you know, not like entirely diabolical, could be so calculated as to not only deny any knowledge of the mishandling of the harassment of a woman that they had already admitted multiple times that they had mishandled my harassment, denying knowledge of that there had ever been any other issues of harassment or misconduct. I could then go another step further and seek to discredit me just on the off chance that I might speak out. Really shook me to my core. I didn't see it coming at all. I truly did not imagine that people that I had worked with for years were capable of something so dark. To attempt to punish someone that they knew had only ever worked with the organisation's best interests at heart, and to try to frame me, the person who had been pushing for greater safety, greater transparency and accountability from day one. They tried to frame that person as someone who was the real threat to people's safety. now I kind of expect anything, honestly. But it's been a journey and I didn't see it coming. I was absolutely blindsided. I was the one that was making the organisation aware that safety was an issue, that we needed to be taking greater responsibility. Given that, there was no real reason to do a targeted search to try to figure out if I was somehow a security risk for people, other than being paranoid that I might have evidence that I might use against them, proof of what I was saying was true, that they had mishandled harassment reports. The swiftness with which I was investigated as a safety risk was just such a massive contrast to how any and all of the reports that I brought to management were handled or not handled. I mean, I'm not even going into what actually happened, the harassment that actually happened, or the reports that I made and how they were responded to, but it's bad. Trust me. I was worried I'd been hacked. But I quickly realized that what the logs actually showed, I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny, was a trial backup of the company servers, which was authorized by the company itself. And they were doing it using all staff accounts, not just mine, to carry out the backup. These mass downloads all had the same traceable IP address, which, like, a 5-minute Google search led me to find that it belonged to the data security and storage firm that the organisation had hired to back up their servers. They'd just forgotten about the backup that they'd authorised this company to do of their servers. And I guess they were just paranoid that, like, I may be plotting or may at some point in the future be plotting some kind of takedown. So they went looking for evidence of that and they thought they found it. And so then they launched a formal investigation into me. You guys already have access to all of my emails. Like, you are welcome to comb through 6 years of emails, because I have nothing to hide, because I haven't done anything wrong. I had to be the one to tell them that. If they were actually doing an organisation-wide security audit, then they would have had somebody who actually understood how basic Google systems work. I was also told during this investigation that my access to all of the organisational servers had been frozen, and this was not the case. So they clearly didn't know how to do that, even really basic stuff, like for over another year. I could see the organisation's Google Calendar, which meant that I could see who was working on which days and when they were having meetings, staff meetings. I mean, they clearly had a security problem, right? But the problem wasn't me. And I had to be the one to tell them about it again. You know, I told them through their lawyers. I was like, hey, so, like, you guys might want to lock down some stuff because former staff members shouldn't have access to these things. But by the end of July 2022, it was clear to me that the way that they were handling my reports over those years and the way that they were engaging with me now, it wasn't just a case of, like, clumsiness or incompetence. Like, this was now malicious and intentional. They were trying to discredit me. It was designed to attack me in their own defense in advance of the possibility that I might in the future say something. And that was really devastating. It's wild to me that even after this, I continued to have hope that they could still respond to my concerns in good faith, but I really did. But I honestly thought that, okay, like, I've done all that I can from internally, you know, it's time to get an external mediator in. So I still had faith in the system. So I contacted the HRC and VCAT to inquire about mediation. And ultimately I put in a civil rights claim with VCAT after they assured me they would facilitate a mediation addressing my allegations, chiefly about harassment and retaliation for reporting harassment. And at that time, I honestly thought if I put together a document, like, clearly showing, like, the dates over how many years, like, exactly, you know, what happened, what I did about it, what the response was, which, you know, was incredibly poor, then, like, of course, anyone in the organisation who had been unaware of any of these incidents, they would be shocked and they would want to set things right. That was what I thought, because the majority of the issues lay with the behaviour of one man. And I suspected that he had not kept the other man fully informed. So I thought, well, if that's the case, if this other man who knows my character and knows my history with the organisation and knows my integrity, and he knows that man's character and he knows that man's history and he knows that man's integrity or lack thereof, and he had his own issues that he had spoken to me about, his frustrations with this man's behaviour. So I thought, well, I mean, he's going to be shocked and upset if there's anything in this report that he was unaware of, and there probably is. And he would, of course he's going to want to rectify the problems, right? No. These guys showed up to the initial mediation session, the only one they showed up to. And it was something that they fought against having to do because their immediate response to the civil rights claim was to deny every allegation in the claim. And they sought for the complaint to be thrown out as vexatious, even though they knew that it wasn't. The man that I thought had some integrity, instead of addressing the misconduct that I spoke about, he focused on A, how incredibly hurtful and distressing it was to read those allegations, and B, I am a deeply problematic and highly manipulative person, that I had put vulnerable people in danger by refusing to disclose victims' identities. I assume this is what he's referring to, the people who had come to me in confidence who had explicitly not given me permission to disclose their identities. So he said that I had dangled the disclosure of these people's identities as a bargaining chip in exchange for seeking financial gain and power. And that is what caused the breakdown of the relationship between myself and management. I never offered up names of anonymous victims at any point. I would never betray a victim's trust like that. In mid-2019, I had received some anonymous reports and I had asked for training and to be given a clear understanding of what the process would be if any of those people in the future chose to come forward to the exclusively straight, white, cis male management. Asked, how could a victim-centred, trauma-informed approach be ensured if that were to take place? I was told to tell those people, I quote, to fuck off if they would not go directly to management. If they would only talk to me about it, the person they felt safe talking to, I should tell them to fuck off. At this time, I was also myself in the middle of fighting for my own harassment to be taken seriously. And I was being pressured to drop that report of harassment altogether. So I knew that I couldn't just simply tell anyone that came to me with their story, trust these men to handle your allegations safely. I could not in good conscience say, fuck off. And I couldn't say, I'm not the right person to talk to, you need to talk to management, because I knew how my case was being handled, and it was being handled very badly and had been for years. It dragged on for years. At this time, I was also incredibly traumatized and vulnerable because I was in the middle of this shit, and my own safety felt very much completely in these men's hands. So this was in mid-2019, and that is the only thing that I can think of that bears any resemblance to the story of she used victims' identities as bargaining chips for power and money, and thus the relationship broke down. But if that were the case, if that happened in mid-2019, why was I then employed for years after that? Even after this, even after that mediation session, I truly thought, okay, well, if only the board knows what happened, if only the board finds out about this, and they will immediately want to address it. Anyone would, hearing these allegations, want to address them. I repeatedly offered to direct them to the relevant correspondence that supported my claims. I was told by their lawyer, the board is fully aware of your allegations and has no intention to investigate. They deny the allegations without investigating them. So I was told there would be no investigation, and I basically just received threats to sue me if I ever make the proof of what I was saying public.